right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I know I am a bit early, but looking at my schedule, this was the best time for me to do this. So if you miss this live session and are only able to join us later, I apologize. Um, that's just sort of how it ended up. So, welcome to everyone who is able to make it. I have my spiral with us. We are looking at 8 weeks worth of material. So I'm really just going to kind of go through the spiral very briefly, highlight a couple of things, and then open the floor for questions. I am outside at the location of my daughter's choir practice, so there may be background noise going on. All right, so we're just going to start at the beginning, like you do. So looking back at Unit 1, for some of my classes, you'll have this Unit 1 review sheet, an excellent tool to look over. I want to highlight that we have our Mayflower Compact, a social contract for self-government. We got 1607, Jamestown. Mayflower Compact is 1620, those two hot dates, 1607 and 1620. I want to highlight the Appalachian Mountain region and the Atlantic Gulf Coastal Plains as two important regions that we looked at in that unit. The Geographic Features, okay, European Exploration and Colonization, Glory, God and Goal, Glory, God and Goal. France, Friends, Fur. Those are all things about colonization. Okay, and Triangle Trade. Right here, we've got triangle trade going on. Raw goods, manufactured goods, going back and forth between England and the Americas, and slaves coming from Africa. And remember that the reason for slaves and the growth of the slave trade was the need for slaves to work in the fields in southern colonies, cash crops. So that was a summary of information that can be found on these notes pages. So here we have our regions map. We want to remember that our Appalachian Mountain region is cold, it's rocky soil, lots of timber in that region. Okay, and then the Atlantic coastal plains and the Gulf coastal plains are going to be good for growing soil, warm climate, all the things. Yes, the slaves to work at the fields for the cash crops. Okay, I'm going to warm up in here. Mostly going to focus on notes. On page 11 of my spiral, you got your European exploration notes. Okay, just looking in. Remember 1607, that England date is a hot date. All right, I'm just looking at those notes, thinking about why people were coming over. Okay. Averil, do we need to know everything from day one of the year? Well, I mean, yes. I don't, there's 15 questions. So obviously in 15 questions, they're not going to cover every single topic. But everything from day one of the year is fair game. They can ask questions about geography. They can ask questions about European colonization. They might ask questions about mercantilism, about salutary neglect, everything from the beginning. Super play, triangle trade. So triangle trade is just a pattern of trade that emerges between the colonies, England, and Africa. Remember, the colonies are sending raw goods to England. England is sending manufactured goods to the colonies. And then there's some trade between Africa and Britain, and then Africa is sending slaves to the colonies. The other name for the triangle trade is the transatlantic slave trade. And the whole thing about the transatlantic slave trade, I will not take questions about what will be on the test or not on the test. Okay. The whole thing about transatlantic slave trade is just that the reason for that is because the southern colonies are able to grow a lot of stuff, and so they grow cash crops, and they need slaves to work in the fields for the cash crops. 1607, hot date, Jamestown. They were looking for gold, ended up growing tobacco. Jamestown is the first permanent settlement, first permanent English settlement. Okay. 1620, Mayflower Compact Social Contract for Self-Government, MCSCSG. Okay. Page 19 in my spiral. Justin Robertson, I can't really speak for your teachers. So I'm not going to answer that question. Just because I don't know exactly what other people did. We talked about the hot date 1776. This is triangle trade, the map. Okay, looking at goods that are being shipped back and forth. We see the slaves going to the colonies. We also see mercantilism, talking about mercantilism and about how mercantilism is restricting trade. Mercantilism is restricting trade. Okay. I do want to point out these test review notes we did after our first test, some of our most missed topic information. 1607, Jamestown, we draw that tobacco plant. And then 1620, MCSCSG. Okay, so remember that's a social contract for self-government. And then down here, the reasons for exploration. Talked about all the reasons that these European countries are coming in and creating colonies. France, fur, agriculture, gold. Then going into Unit 2. Highlight on our colonies timeline, again, 1607 and 1620. Okay, and then the only other thing we really focused on was that Georgia is last. Georgia is the last colony. And then we see our chart where we have New England is in the red. The middle colonies are yellow, and the southern colonies are the green. Yours might be colored differently, but that's what my colors are, New England, middle, and southern. And remember up here, they have lots of timber, but they have cold season. They can't grow anything, so they're primarily based in trade. They have a lot of deep harbors and good natural ports, so they can engage in trade. So luckily, having that really good coastline helps them out a lot. Middle is farming. That's the breadbasket colonies. And southern, that's where we're growing all the cash crops on plantations. Okay. I also want to highlight our Pilgrim groups. I tried to teach y'all to do this umbrella. Puritans in Massachusetts. Quakers in Pennsylvania. I'm trying to get it to focus. There we go. Quakers in Pennsylvania and Catholics in Maryland. Okay, so those three Puritan groups. Let's see what's next. Got in here. Oh, remember Colony? Here's our friend Colin. We talked about how the New England is religious and they're building ships because of all their trees. And they have that deep harbor and the water is super important and it's cold. Okay, and then the breadbasket colonies are in the middle, just like your stomach's in the middle. So they have all that food. And then the cash crops which anytime you see cash crops, I told my students you can draw a little plant with a dollar sign at the top that helps you remember cash crops, are in the South. So New England, Middle, Southern. New England, Middle, Southern. And the king's way over here, and he's got his sunglasses on, and that's salutary neglect. He's not paying attention to us. Okay, and our relevant application, our blog post. Okay, then we have the Great Awakening. Super play, sorry. Catholics go to Maryland. Puritans go to Massachusetts. Quakers go to Pennsylvania. I'm going to type that in too. Puritans go to Massachusetts. Quakers go to Pennsylvania. And the Catholics go to Maryland. Maryland, because Catholics like Mary. Great Awakening. Okay. You have just the basic information here. And then we like to say, we always go back down to the strategy for this is choice and voice. So you get a religious choice that increases your political voice and makes them start to question the king. So religious choice leads to political voice, choice and voice. Okay. Then you have your founding documents. Okay, that gallery walk we did, but I'm going to focus on the tree for that. Okay, so we'll get to that tree in just a second, and I'll focus on that one for it. Oh, and by just a second, I mean literally that's the next thing. So we drew our tree as the focus with our founding documents. Okay, this is our tree. And you can see all the founding documents on here. You got the Magna Carta, which has got your little king there because it limits the king. Okay, the English Bill of Rights, which is, lists our rights. The Mayflower Compact, which is MCSCSG. The Virginia House of Burgesses is the first representative government. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, okay, which is the first official constitution. And the Great Awakening, which is choice and voice. And all of that leading us to representative government. All of that is, okay, all of this is components of self-government. Mayflower Compact is the most self-government-y thing, but all of these are kind of self-government. All of them are kind of representative government. So it's all leading us here. This is all about the growth of representative government, of self-government in the colonies. Okay, the growth of representative government and self-government. I also want to point out in our tree, the water droplets that are helping the tree grow. We're far away from England. We have a small population. The king is distracted. And we have salutary neglect. Remember, salutary neglect and mercantilism are like opposites. Okay, they're like opposites. So on the one hand, you have salutary neglect. And salutary neglect says things like, no, I'm not at home. Salutary neglect says things like, we're not going to pay attention. You do whatever you want. Have some self-government, have representative government, trade with who you want to trade with, whatever. That's salutary neglect. We're not paying attention, so just do what you want. Yeah, I wish my house looked like this. No, it's not my house. The mercantilism, on the other hand, is very restrictive. We're going to tell you who you can trade with and who you can't trade with, and we're going to have a lot of laws. And we're going to and mercantilism is really just all about restricting trade, telling you cannot trade with, and getting money for Britain. Okay, and getting money for Britain. So mercantilism and salutary neglect are like opposites. Salutary neglect makes us happy. Mercantilism makes us angry. Salutary neglect makes us happy. Mercantilism makes us angry. Okay. Unit 3, and I know I'm going through this quickly, but you can always play back the video or pause. Unit 3, We start off with talking about the French and Indian War, and you see that timeline where salutary neglect is here and it's making us happy. And we talk about mercantilism, a couple facts on mercantilism, and the Great Awakening. We're still happy, but we're starting to question some things. And then we get the proclamation line of 1763, and that's when our grievances, our complaints, our anger begins. Okay? Is with the proclamation line of 1763. They tell us you can't go over there. And we're angry for 3 reasons. We're angry because of the taxes. We're angry because of the proclamation line. And we're angry because salutary neglect is ending and mercantilism is going to be more active. Okay? And just remember French and Indian War, French and Indians on one side, Britain on the other. It puts Britain in debt. And that's really one of the biggest takeaways is Britain is going to be in debt. And because they're in debt, they owe money. And by owing money, they need to make that money back. So they start taxing us. Okay? And they tax us specifically to make our money back, to make their money back. I don't have a copy taped in here, but my students at least should have your district checkpoint, the 5-question checkpoint we did earlier in the year on page 41. I would suggest looking at that and seeing which ones you missed and really reviewing the ones you missed. Okay, that's a really great kind of good checkpoint. And then we have our causes notes. And I know these are pretty dense. Okay. But remember, just in general, if you have taxes, you tax stuff, we're going to boycott it. Okay. You tax paper, we're going to boycott paper. You tax sugar, we're going to boycott sugar. You tax lead and paper and glass, we're going to boycott that. We're going to boycott whatever it is you tax, we're boycotting that. All right, and the Sons of Liberty organized that by Samuel Adams. And then we get the Boston Massacre, where Crispus Attucks is killed. You see the Tea Act leads to the Boston Tea Party, leads to the Intolerable Acts. And then we have the shot heard around the world is Lexington and Concord. It's going to be the first battle of the American Revolution, Lexington and Concord. And then you have the Declaration of Independence, which we talked about today. Okay. The Declaration of Independence should not technically be on there. Technically. Everything else on that is fair game. Okay. I have randomly on this page right here just some notes on mercantilism and salutary neglect. A couple reminders. Those are pretty big, important ideas. Yes, Superplay. The proclamation line makes the colonists mad because they don't get the land that they fought for. They fought for this land, they died for this land, and they can't go over there. Okay? So it makes them mad. So that's the whole spiral in 18 minutes. Pretty impressive. So let's go to questions. Remember, I don't know what's on the DPM. Okay? And even if I did, I couldn't tell you because that would be cheating. But they rewrite the DPM every year. They ship it to us in a sealed box, and then Miss Halupa hangs onto it until the afternoon before the test, and then she puts it in our rooms after we leave. So, fun. I mean, big concepts, colonization, why are people colonizing? We spent a lot of time talking about the geography. Oh, well, good for you, Superplay. We spent a lot of time talking about the geography of the colonies, like the New England colonies had this geography, and the middle colonies had this geography, and the southern colonies had this geography, and how that geography helps them economically. So that's a big deal. The growth of representative government and self-government in the colonies, that's a pretty big deal. How all these ideas like the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut and the Mayflower Compact are saying that people can make their own choices and own decisions. House of Burgesses first representative government. So does anybody who isn't Super Play have questions? Another tactic you could take is go through your spiral. Good luck, Super Play. Go through your spiral and look for where you missed questions. Like if you missed a question on a warm-up, go and look at that question that you missed. Okay, a lot of times we like to focus on the things we did well, which is great and a way to celebrate ourselves. But if we want to grow and get better, we need to focus on what we got wrong. Okay, that's how we grow and get better, is by focusing on what we got wrong. So one great study technique is to go through your old papers and look at what you missed. So I'm like in a place where there's like people and they're like walking past me and they're staring at me because I'm just talking to my computer. It's gorgeous outside today though. Oh, the Pilgrim Groups. Puritans, Massachusetts. Quakers, Pennsylvania. Catholics, Maryland. Big one. Yeah, rain. We got crickets right now. I'm ripping up the grass. Sitting in the grass. Hope I don't get bitten by ants. I don't like ants. I hope there's no crickets in the grass. My Coke Zero. I'm gonna drink this. Yeah, you know, when you go through the entire spiral in 18 minutes, it makes you feel like you haven't been doing much. Like there's a building over here, and then there's a building behind me. It's got a lot of plants. Pretty. I gotta have that Coke Zero, Rain. You know me. I got to have that Coke Zero. Got to. I don't take bribes, but if I did, it would be in the form of candy and Coke Zero. Because I love both candy and Coke Zero. Okay. I'm using my phone as a hotspot. There's no free Wi-Fi here. Yep. Everything I've taught you for 8 weeks, summed up in 19 minutes. Part of you got to be like, what are we spending so much time in class on? I teach stuff. Make sure you use your strategies. Hot dates, really big deal. 1607, 1620. You should have those memorized. 1607, Jamestown. 1620, Mayflower Compact. I told everybody it was going to be late today, so they're all going to show up at 7:15. I'm going to feel bad. I won't be there. I'll be in a meeting. Figured out I had a meeting at 7 o'clock. But this review will still be there. And it'll be shorter than the other reviews. No taxation without representation. You guys should have that one by now. Right? Quartering Act, always draw the little house. Draw the little house for Quartering Act. This is a really good warm-up to look back over. Talks about mercantilism and salutary neglect in a little bit more detail. Help you with those concepts. Those are hard. Economic policies. Not the most interesting things in the world, but how people make money or don't make money. So there will not be any questions about how many children Miss FM has. Just so you know. I'm looking for other good warm-ups that might help you. Oh yeah, this is a really good one. How does geography affect economy? I've got it on page 29. That's another good one you can do. I have to say I'm really impressed with you 5 people who are still hanging in there watching this, even though we're not talking about anything. You know what? Honestly, you should probably review this sucker before every test. That little chart that has our economic, political, geographic, and social. So that then when they ask you questions about is this economic, is this political, or is this a social, or which of the following is a social reason, it can help you with remembering what counts as social. Remember, religion is always social. Okay? That's actually a really useful thing to look at every test, but especially before DPM. Also, if you go to Quizlet, search for my name, a bunch of old Quizlets on there. You could look at the Quizlets. See how many you could do? Sometimes I make Quizlet for things, sometimes I don't. Jesse Pans. I'm just going to look up really quickly what kind of Quizlets I have in here. I've got one for Cause of the American Revolution. Got one for 13 colonies. Because I have 11 sets. Hold on. 13 colonies. I've got one for that says fall mid-semester cumulative topics. Okay, let me share that link with y'all. It's from last year, but still be a useful tool for studying. There's YouTube. There you go. There's that Quizlet link. It's quizlet.com/_5GR2IH. So quizlet.com/_5GR2IH. If that doesn't work, just search for my name, Amy Foster-Munoz, and scroll down until you get to one titled Fall Mid-Semester Cumulative Topics. So there you go. That is the wrong tab. There we go. There's my tab. Okay. We're at 28 minutes now. Probably going to give it another 2 minutes, just see if anybody else has any questions. And then I'm going to call it a review. And I said we're back up to 12 people now. Got 13 people. It's getting crazy up in here. Of course, they're probably all at the beginning of the video. And I'm sitting here at the end of the video, talking to nobody except the crickets and my Coke Zero, my good friend, Coke Zero. And Rain Bailey. Rain, it was times like this last year when a former student of mine would start looking up random facts about things. We got on this kick about finding out random facts about jelly beans. Because there's an American president, there was an American president who loved jelly beans. He got his own jelly bean named after him. We don't have any American presidents yet in this point in history. We got some leaders. Benjamin Franklin's an interesting guy. Bifocals. Careful if you Google him, though. Much of his life is wildly inappropriate for middle schoolers. They should make a movie about the life of Benjamin Franklin. You could put that on you could make that into like a Game of Thrones series. Benjamin Franklin's life, the true story, like that could be a Game of Thrones-esque kind of thing. Like people killing each other and like inappropriate stuff going on. Benjamin Franklin, interesting fellow. Sam Adams. I also think they should make a movie about Sam Adams. Why do they not have a movie about Sam Adams? Guy was like crazy loco. Like he founds the Sons of Liberty and he comes up with this idea to throw tea in the harbor. He's just like he is such a propagandist. He hates the British so much. He trains his dog to bite anyone in a red coat. True story. Trains his dog to bite anyone in a red coat. That's how crazy Sam Adams was. That is not likely to be on any test, FYI. I guess I could ramble about things. I know, right, Rain? I know. I could ramble about things that might be on the test. I've never been to New England, that part of the country, still called New England. When you travel up there, go to New England. Here they got rocky soil. But don't worry, they're really close to the Atlantic Ocean with their nice natural harbors and their good coastline. That's where Mr. Boyko is from, is New England. He's from New York. Well, upstate New York, which I guess is technically middle colonies. But New York is middle colonies, everybody. Mr. Boyko is not from New England. He's from the breadbasket. Hello. Yep. People are staring at me. Mr. Boyko is from the breadbasket. You know who else is from the breadbasket? Mr. Dixon, also from New York State. I'm from Texas. That's super exciting. Hi, Kevin. Long time no see. You know, most of the shipyards of the United States, like the Navy shipyards where they build the Navy ships, are actually still located in New England because they have those great harbors still, and you go and you could park hundreds of boats in there, and they're super deep natural harbors. But so they're not only good for trade, they're good for shipbuilding. We still build Navy ships up there. We build most of our Navy ships. You can't do, when you can't grow things, you start to get really limited on what you can do to make money. So growing things has its limit too, right? Like cash crops are all well and good in 1750, but not as much today. I mean, this shirt costs what, like $5? Cotton is not really a cash crop anymore. But it is in the time period. And oh shoot, I threw grass on my computer. When we had slaves, okay, when we had slaves, it was because of cash crops. It's fascinating. The entire reason we had slavery in America is because it's warm in the South and you can grow stuff. That's like the entire reason we had slavery. If there was no warm places in America, if there was nowhere to grow cash crops in abundance like that, we probably wouldn't have slavery. You know, Britain, England outlawed slavery about 120 years before the United States did. Like 120 years before the United States banned slavery, Britain did. It was like right after the Revolution. And they did that because they're a tiny island with no warm places. They don't have any cash crops. They don't need slaves. And I mean, nobody needs slaves. But they didn't need a lot of cheap work. They didn't need cheap labor to grow their cash crops because they didn't have any cash crops. Okay, and once they lose the colonies, it's easy to ban slavery because we were the ones who needed the slaves, not them. Tanner, I'm actually at my church. My daughter has choir practice. I already showed it around. I'm not gonna do it again. So I'm just chilling outside, waiting for her to get out of practice and waiting for my meeting to start. I have a meeting here right after she gets out. Fun times, good times, keeping busy. Oh, good. Okay. What was the punishment for the Boston? Oh, excellent question, Rain. The punishment for the Boston Tea Party is the Intolerable Acts. And the Intolerable Acts are most notable for having 3 parts. It stops imports and exports out of the Boston harbor. So it basically says Boston can't trade anymore. And remember, Boston is in the New England colonies. So all of their income, all of their economic activities are based on trade out of their harbors. So not being able to import and export means nobody's making any money. Okay. The second part of it is it increases quartering because they're going to send a bunch more soldiers over. So they send about 1,000 more soldiers into Boston, and they make the people keep them in their houses. And then finally, the last thing is stopping, canceling their town meetings, which is essentially ending self-government in Massachusetts. Ending self-government in Massachusetts, the place where self-government started, with the Mayflower Compact, which is a social contract for self-government signed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So they get rid of something that started there. So it's a pretty big deal to them. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Mayflower Compact, these are all documents for self-government. Okay, Tanner. Triangle trade is just a pattern of trade between the colonies, England, and Africa. The two most important parts of triangle trade are between the colonies and Britain, where the colonies are sending raw goods like cotton, sugar, tobacco, lumber, timber from New England, timber, iron, and they're sending that to England. And then England has factories. America has no manufacturing. Colonial manufacturing is a unicorn. It doesn't exist. Unicorns don't exist, and neither does colonial manufacturing. It's not a thing. They have no factories. But Britain has lots of factories. So we send our stuff to England. England sends it to their factories, makes stuff, and sends it back to us to buy. Clothing, tables, chairs, weapons, all sorts of stuff like that. Anything that they've made in their factories. Okay? I know, I killed a lot of people with the fact that unicorns don't exist. Okay? Colonial manufacturing is a unicorn. It doesn't exist. And then the other important part of triangle trade, so that's like the top part of triangle trade. And the other important part is the part between Africa and the colonies, because that's where the slave trade comes in. Okay? And that's when you see all of the slaves being sent to the colonies. And they're being sent to the colonies because of those cash crops. Triangle trade. The bottom part between Africa and the colonies is also called the Transatlantic slave trade, because it's literally just means slave trade that happens across the Atlantic. That's what transatlantic slave trade means. Not the most creative name in the world. You're welcome, Tanner. You're welcome, Rain. 37 minutes. More people are staring at me. Love being stared at. Wave at them. Ah, yes, strange person staring at you. Okay. You haven't gone outside today. It's beautiful. Like a balmy 79 degrees right now. So last time, spiral is a useful tool. Haven't been keeping up with your spiral, you need to keep up with your spiral. My second, third, fourth, and sixth period classes should have review sheets for each unit. Should be taped in on your first page of each unit. This is really only my second, third, fourth, and sixth, but that's a great place for you to look. Otherwise, go to your spiral. Okay. Look for questions you got wrong on warm-ups. Look at your district checkpoint, the 5-question checkpoint we did in my class is taped on page 41. Ms. Wynn, why did the colonists oppose the writs of assistance? Because the writs of assistance allowed for unreasonable search and seizure. So the writs of assistance said anyone could come in your house and search it at any time without a warrant. In our country, we believe today, based on our Constitution, we have the right to, if somebody wants to search our house, they have to go to a judge and they have to say, we think this person has this, and this is our proof that they might have that. This is our evidence. This is why we think you should allow us to do it. And a judge has to give them permission. And the warrant says, look, we have permission from a judge to look inside your house. The writs of assistance, and that used to be the way in Britain too. In Britain, they had that same process. You had to get it approved by a judge. But the writs to assistance say you don't need a judge. Any soldier can come in your house and search it for any reason. And if they find something that looks suspicious, they can take it. Okay. I think that we are still debating that question, cringy boy. What teaks will be on the test? Question. Let's look at our teaks questions. Let's see. Our Unit 1 teaks questions. 10B, how are regions in the U.S. different and how are they the same? Okay. 12A, what are economic differences between regions? B, it's literally just B. What notable events happened in 1607 and 1620? Hot dates. 2A, what are the major reasons for English, Spanish, and French exploration and colonization? 12B, why did the plantation system develop and how does it relate to the transatlantic slave trade and spread of slavery? Looking for Unit 2. All right, Unit 2. 10A and 10B again, which is just the geography of different regions. So knowing New England, Middle, and Southern and their different geographic and economic things. So why the geography and economics of New England and Middle and Southern and how they're all different. 3-A, why did representative government and self-government institutions grow in the colonial period? 3-B, why is the fundamental orders of Connecticut important? 3-C, how did religion and virtue, that's really referencing the Great Awakening, contribute to the growth of representative government? Because remember, it says makes people more participate more in politics. How did ideas from historic documents such as the Magna Carta, English Bill of Rights, Mayflower Compact, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut influence the U.S. system of government? So representative government and self-government. Yeah, Unit 3. And remember, again, there's only 15 questions, but these are all the teaks that are fair game. Luckily, there's not a lot of teaks in Unit 3, right? 4A, what are the different tax acts and how did the colonists react to each one? 225-B, how did the First Great Awakening help to cause the American Revolution? 20B, how is the Boston Tea Party an example of civil disobedience? What were the causes and effects of the Boston Tea Party? 4A, what role did economics play in causing the American Revolution? Consider things like salutary neglect, mercantilism, and taxation. And 4A also is what are the effects of the French and Indian War? Oh. Okay, so those are all the teaks that could possibly be covered on the test. A whole bunch of children walking past me. Yeah, First Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening happens over the course of like 20 to 30 years. It's not a fast thing. Okay, it's not like one day nobody was religious and the next day everybody was religious. But over the course of about 20 or 30 years, the Great Awakening happens, and all these people start talking about religion and the role of religion in life. And it's this religious movement that tries to increases people's awareness and participation in religion, get people to come back to church. And one of the main lessons that they talk about in the Great Awakening is that God created all people equal. Okay, and that all people actually are sinners in the eyes of God. One of the most famous sermons from this time is called Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God, because we're all equally sinners. Nobody is born perfect. We're all born as sinners and we need God to save us and we need to participate in the church. The interesting effect of the Great Awakening and what nobody thought was going to happen, what nobody realized would be an effect, is that people become really active in politics. because they start to apply this idea of choice in your religion and this idea of equality, and they want to apply it to politics. And they start to question. They're still happy colonists, they're still loyal to the king, but they start to question, if everybody is equal in the eyes of God, why do we have a king? Why do we have a king if everybody's equal in the eyes of God? And the phrase that I taught my classes, that we were supposed to teach our classes to remember this, is choice and voice. We have a religious choice that gives us a political voice. Okay, so it's religious movement leads to a political effect. Yeah, the part of the problem with learning history and teaching history is that like things feel like it's like a one day thing, because you learn about it for one day. So you think of it as happening fast, when a lot of times the things we learn about for one day happen for a very long time. Like salutary neglect, that was 100 years of time. Salutary neglect, 150 years of time experiencing salutary neglect, which is how representative government and self-government in the colonies grows, is because England is not paying any attention to us. We get to do whatever we want, and what we want is self-government. We want representative government. So, and then mercantilism is another thing. It goes on and on and on. Mercantilism starts they do like tiny bits of mercantilism when it suits them, and we just kind of ignore it for the most part because they're ignoring us, so we sort of ignore what they tell us to do. And it's not until after the proclamation line and boom, there's that sudden shift. And then suddenly we have a list of problems, a list of complaints, a list of grievances with England. Good questions, you guys. It's a good crowd tonight. Good crowd tonight. Oh, good question, Superplate. Joint stock. There are 3 types of ways of getting permission to settle in the colonies. So, in order to settle in the colonies, what you have to remember is technically all of the land of the colonies technically belongs to the king. And so, in order to go and settle in the colony, you need some kind of permission. And there were 3 ways you could get that permission. One is a joint stock company. Okay. And that's where it's like a publicly traded company today, like on Shark Tank, where it's all like, hey, if you give me $1 million, I'll give you a 20% share in all my profits. Okay, so I'll pay your $1 million back. And then on top of that $1 million, you'll get 20% of everything I make. And so these joint stock companies would get rich people to invest in their company, and the company would get people to go over to the colonies to really first search for gold. And then if you didn't find gold, you ended up doing something like growing tobacco. And that tobacco technically belonged to the company. And so you'd send it back to England, the company would sell it and make money. And so this joint stock company is a method of getting people over to the colonies with the purpose of making money. The second way is with a royal charter, a royal colony. And that's just literally getting permission directly from the king. The king is in charge of that colony, and he says, you can go live on this, and I'm going to put some guy in charge of it. And then there's a charter company, which is like a private company. So instead of getting any investors, I'm rich and I don't need anybody else's money. So I'm just going to go to the king and get him to give me permission. And I'm going to send people over there, and then I'll make all the profit and keep it all myself. So, 2 out of the 3 are really about making money. And then the third one is just getting permission from the king. So those are just, joint stock is just one of the ways that colonies were formed, with the purpose of making money through primarily agriculture. England's a very small island. They don't have a lot of agriculture. They don't have a lot of really good soil. Their geography is kind of like the geography of New England. Rocky soil, not great for growing things. So they really relied on the colonies to provide a lot of their agricultural resources, like tobacco, sugar, cotton, wheat, rice, timber, which is just a fancy word for when you cut trees down. So we have to know all the physical regions. I would focus most on the physical regions that affect what we've learned so far. So, like the Appalachian Mountain region affects what we've learned so far because obviously the Appalachian Mountains are a barrier to movement, but also because they affect that New England geography. Because the geography of New England is that rocky soil, lots of wood trees, lots of timber, really good coastline. Okay. And then, so that would be one. And then the Atlantic coastal plain is the other one I would really focus on. Because those are the two regions that we have in our history story. The Appalachian Mountain region and the Atlantic coastal plain are the two regions where we got people living right now. So the first 8 weeks are all about exploring those two regions. So I would focus on those two regions. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but those are the two I would focus on. So bad for the people who are coming in later. They're going to get to the middle and they're going to be like, wow, there's like 20 minutes of nothing. Self-government just means the people get to make the decisions. So technically in the United States today, we have self-government because I vote on who I want to go to Congress and I vote on the president. That's self-government. I'm picking the people who are in charge of me. If I was living in a monarchy, I don't get to pick the king. That's not self-government. That's government by somebody who was picked for me. It's like the difference between like when you pick your own electives, that would be self-government. If your parents pick your electives for you, that is not self-government. So that would be a difference there. That's kind of what self-government is. And self-government is really important in the colonies. It's something that starts with the Mayflower Compact, grows with the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, and then obviously the Declaration of Independence, the whole consent of the governed, the whole like we're going to become separate from Britain. That's all about keeping self-government for the colonies. And one of the reasons that the intolerable acts are intolerable is because they cancel all the town meetings where self-government is happening. So basically tries to end self-government in Massachusetts. Can you explain Lexington and Concord? I don't know, Tanner, can you? Stupid joke, I apologize. Yeah, Lexington and Concord, it's the first battle of the American Revolution. It is known as the shot heard around the world. Literally, the British were trying to march to Concord to try to capture some weapons that the colonists are sort of stockpiling these weapons just in case. And the British want to go get those weapons. And so the British walk in, and the British are on one side, and the colonists are on the other side, and they're all like, "Move out of our way!" And they're like, "No, you move. We're not gonna move. You go away." And they just stand there and stare at each other for about 10 minutes, and then somebody fires, and we don't know who, but that shot is the beginning of the American Revolution. It's a shot heard around the world. Lexington and Concord are considered the first battle of the American Revolution. Averill. So the town hall meetings are canceled in the Intolerable Acts. So those do not meet anymore until after the revolution starts, and then they'll start meeting again. But don't forget that there's a Continental Congress going on after Lexington and Concord, the Second Continental Congress, and representatives are elected for that. So that even the Continental Congress is an example of self-government. We have approximately about 5 more minutes before we wrap up. If anybody else has any other questions. De nada. You picked one of the 6 words I know in Spanish. 5 more minutes until I'm not embarrassed anymore. Though there's not as many people right now. It is starting to get a little darker though. So I don't know how much longer you'll be able to see this. Are there any other countries involved? So at the very beginning, we talk about France and Spain. So France, Spain, and England are the 3 European countries we talk about coming over to colonize North America. Okay, remember, because Spain is all about the gold and spreading religion. France wants to spread religion, and they're fur. They're friends with the Native Americans. They like to sell fur. And then England is really mostly here for agriculture. They tried to find some gold, they didn't find any, so they come for agriculture. But they're really all coming to make money. They're all coming to spread religion, and they're all coming to spread the pride and nationalism of their country. Okay, those are right now, those are the only times we've talked about any other country, except the French and Indian War. Obviously, France loses French and Indian War like a bunch of losers, but we really shouldn't call them that because we can't win the American Revolution without their help. But that's a spoiler. So you don't need to worry about that. But so we talk about France and Spain for colonization and exploration, and we talk about France for the French and Indian War. So those are the ways other countries come into play. That's a good question. About 3 more minutes left. So once again, if you're at home, use your spiral to review. Focus on things you got wrong. What are Catholics about? Well, that's a long answer. No. Catholics settle in Maryland. That's what you need to know with the Catholics, okay? But there's 3 pilgrim groups, and they settle in 3 different places. Catholics go to Maryland, Quakers go to Pennsylvania, Puritans go to Massachusetts. That's it. Guys, I think Miss Marshall's asking all of y'all, so can you guys all say why 1607 is important? Miss Potato, that is one method you can do. You can go through the TEKS questions and look at those. Absolutely. Miss Potato gets a special potato. Miss Potato gets some french fries. Jamestown is the correct answer. 1607 is Jamestown. So you have a lot of ways of studying. I shared a Quizlet earlier in this. You can use that Quizlet. You can go through the TEKS questions for each unit. If you're in my 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 6th period class, you can use your review sheets that you were given for the last 3 units. You can just go through your spiral and look at things you got wrong. Yes, it is, but if I was a potato, I'd consider it. I mean, I wouldn't as a human being, but french fries are delicious. So it might be worth a little cannibalism. Okay. And look for, Georgia's for debtors. Georgia's also the last colony, and it's a buffer colony. It's 3 things in Georgia. Last, buffer, debtors. They're the last buffer debtors I ever met. Ah, Georgia. Flies out here. Go back and look at some of your warm-ups. Look at questions you missed on your warm-up. Look at that 5-question district checkpoint. Look at questions you missed there. Superplay, Georgia is a buffer colony. Remember, because they're founded to protect the Carolinas from Native American attacks out of Spanish Florida. So, I mean, it's just Georgia is last, they're a buffer, and they're full of debtors. That's just the 3 things about Georgia. Last, buffer, debtors. Okay. Yeah. The other thing you can do is look at your old tests. Oh, buffer means like a protection, like a buffer, like a bouncer is a buffer between people trying to get in the club and the club. Okay. A bodyguard is a buffer between a famous person and their overly enthusiastic fans. So a buffer is just something that protects something, something that stands in between to protect. I would look at the tests, the 3 tests we took, and look at the unit. So all of those questions about the geography of New England, geography of Middle, geography of Southern, economies of Middle, economy of Southern, economy of New England, transatlantic slave trade, mercantilism, all of that. Okay. Last question before we sign out. What caused the slave trade to increase? Tobacco is an excellent example. Growth in the southern colonies. Tobacco is an example of something they were doing in the southern colonies. And what is that broad term that we talk about that is happening in the southern colonies? Draw the picture with the dollar signs on the top. Plants with dollar signs. Yes, cash crop. Absolutely good. That hits us at an hour of review time. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. You guys have been a really great audience tonight. I really appreciate all of you, especially those of you who stuck with us the entire way through. Have a great night. Pay some special love and attention to your spiral this evening. If you got your blue book at home, look at your blue book. If not, take a look at the Quizlet. Have a great evening and good night.